All right, guys, so we have some pretty big breaking news, and it's actually good news for once. I know that most of the time it's like breaking news, Donald Trump bombs Iran, breaking news, the Supreme Court just struck down the Voting Rights Act, but this is actually good news. So I saw this late last night. It appears that Janet Mills, the current governor of Maine, who's running for Susan Collins' seat in the Senate as a Democrat, is suspending her campaign. So according to her, she's saying, I still have the will, I still have the drive. Unfortunately, I no longer have the money, and so I'm going to have to drop out. I want to remind everybody, because this is crazy, Janet Mills is Chuck Schumer's hand-picked candidate to go up against Graham Platner, the progressive. And the only reason that Chuck Schumer has the job that he does is because he raises gobs and gobs of money from special interest groups and large donors. And the donors are saying, look, we're tired of lighting our money on fire. We're done. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. And it's not surprising because the last polling that I've seen, Graham Platner was up massively over Janet Mills. Like, I'm talking about like 55% to like 28% or something like that. It's crazy. Now, Susan Collins, who is the current senator who's up for re-election in November in Maine, the Republican, she's the so-called, like moderate Republican because she every now and again votes against Trump. Like, she just voted to block military action in Cuba, even though all of the other Republicans voted for it, except for like Rand Paul. So every now and again, she does vote the correct way, but for the most part, she's just a Trump enabler. She's a MAGA Republican. Graham Platner is much younger than both of them. Like, Janet Mills is 78, and Chuck Schumer wants her to run for the Senate for the first time at 78 years old. Jesus. And Susan Collins is not much younger. She's only, I think she's 73. Graham Platner is like in his early 40s. He's like 41 or 42 or something like that. And the real benefit, I think, that plays in his favor is the fact that Graham Platner is an oyster fisherman, like he's an oyster farmer. He's an Iraq war veteran, and he's just a normal guy who has not been tainted and jaded by like decades and decades and decades of being in politics. And I think that's very appealing for a lot of people, especially running against somebody like Susan Collins, who, if I remember right, is the longest serving member of Congress from Maine. And according to the polls between, like her and Graham Platner, Platner is up like at least 8 points over Susan Collins. Now, both of them, Janet Mills and Graham Platner in the polls are looking like they would have beaten Susan Collins, but Graham Platner is winning by a larger margin. And so that's also positive. The thing that we have to remember is, I don't know if any or all of the Janet Mills voters are going to suddenly shift over to support Graham Platner. In a world that made sense, where the Democrats actually want to defeat MAGA and to curb their power, and for the Democrats to take back control in both the Senate and eventually, like everywhere, that you would support the progressive candidate. But these people would rather lose to Republicans than win with progressives. And we know that because Chuck Schumer, again, the minority leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate, did not endorse Zoran Mamdani when it was clear as day that he was running away with that election as mayor of New York. The Democratic leader in the Senate did not support Mamdani. And I think Hakeem Jeffries, eventually at the very last second was like, okay, I guess I'll endorse Zoran, even though, again, it was clear that he was going to run away with it. So party leadership, the neoliberals, the milquetoast centrists, do not want to win with progressives. They will begrudgingly win with progressives, but they don't want to win with progressives. So it'll be interesting to see if Platner is able to scoop up the votes from Janet Mills' block. And, obviously they should. Like I said, these people are the vote blue no matter who people, except for if it's a progressive, in which case they will drag their feet and not endorse. But even if they don't, unless all of these Janet Mills voters decide like they're girl power type voters and they like decide to flip to Susan Collins, I think that Graham Platner has a very clear path to victory. It's not over yet. It's not a foregone conclusion yet. We are still several months away from November, but currently Graham Platner is favored to win against Susan Collins by at least 8 points. And that's really positive news. Because like I said, he's a normal guy. He takes small dollar donations, so he's not worried about the money drying up. And you know, I think there's a lot of appetite for just normal people who haven't been in politics for decades, who haven't been ruined by the institution, who don't take money from huge special interest groups. And we desperately need somebody like, you know, like Graham Platner, as long as he doesn't end up being like the next John Fetterman. Which I think is funny because Mehdi Hassan from Zateo actually interviewed Graham Platner, and that was one of the questions that he asked him. He was like, what about people who say, you know, like, what if you become John Fetterman? And his reaction was just like, oh, God, that guy is like the bane of my existence. And so he's aware of what that dynamic looks like. And the other good thing is that like all of these attacks that used to land are just not landing anymore. Like they tried to go after him for a tattoo. They were like, that's a Nazi tattoo. And he's like, oh, I didn't know. I got it when I was like 20 years old. I'll go ahead and get it covered up. And, you know, so like, it's just like that kind of thing where it used to be like this giant scandal. He's just like, whatever. I mean, the age of Donald Trump, you know, like we have people who are literal pedophiles that serve in Congress and people don't care anymore. So you think they're going to care about a tattoo that he got when he was in his 20s? I just don't think those attacks are landing. And like I said, we desperately need somebody like Graham Platner in the Senate. Bernie has been great for decades. He's been consistent for decades, but Bernie is 83 or 84 or something like that. We need new blood. And we're starting to see some of the other Democratic senators come around and see the light. You got people like Chris Van Hollen and Chris Murphy who are looking a lot better. I mean, like Chris Murphy, for example, has come out and publicly did like a mea culpa and said, look, I'm really disappointed in myself for taking money from the Israel lobby for so long, for AIPAC. And at this point, I'm no longer taking that money. I'm returning that money. And I'm saying emphatically, I don't want to continue to take money from groups like the Israel lobby and from large money donors that are trying to basically buy my vote on whatever. I'd rather fund the campaign with, with small dollar donors. So we need more people like that. And the great news is, like I said, Graham Platner, he's 41, he's young, he's energetic, he's exciting, he's not your normal politician, he's progressive, he supports all the right policies, and I think he has a really, really good shot of beating Susan Collins. So that's the good news for today.